Hey everybody, I'm Sierra,
And I'm Ben.
and welcome back to another episode of The Unsolved Couple, where every week, Ben and I recap one of the original gateway drugs into true crime.
Unsolved Mysteries.
It's
We're back.
episode number 3.
We made it back.
If anyone is still listening to us,
We're not a mystery.
we are not a mystery anymore.
No.
No. But we are still talking about
Well, we're talking about mysteries.
unsolved mysteries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, one of my favorite TV shows growing up. It was one of my gateway drugs into true crime, and a TV show that Ben hated watching growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I will say this one, though, this one was interesting.
This was an interesting episode. I agree 100%. I think though most of these are solved at this point or have had some conclusion to them, when they aired, they were in-depth stories.
Yeah, they were pretty interesting. I mean, the last one again.
Last week's episode was a rough one. It was.
Yeah, maybe that was kind of the last week. That dude. I mean, obviously, I don't care for this show. Period. But last week was rough.
Yeah.
This one, I think it had some better. I mean, if you want to call it that, I guess. But it was a little more intriguing with the stories to be told.
Wait, did you like this episode?
Let's not. I mean, that's a bridge too far.
You don't want to jump to that conclusion.
No, here's the thing. I've been holding this grudge against this show my entire life.
You're not willing to let it go after 3 episodes?
No, absolutely not. It's this show, and did I talk about this in our first one? It was this show and Rescue 911 that I hated.
We did not bring up Rescue 911.
I hated that show as a
Mm-hmm.
kid. I still have. It's just crazy because now I get these calls, but I still have like nightmares about some of the things I saw on Rescue 911. It was terrible, but the one I still remember to this day was about a little girl or a kid that fell into like this pipe like down in the ground and got stuck.
This is giving me like
And the kid
anxiety.
was stuck like doing the splits, like
What?
there for hours on end as they were trying to rescue him. It was I mean, kid came out safe.
Everyone's okay at the
At
end.
least that's all I remember as a child. But it was like the worst story I've ever heard in my
And
life.
then you just had this perpetual fear that like you
So
at
when
any
there
point
was
could fall
hole
into a
on the
pipe.
ground, man,
Anything could happen.
take a wide berth from that thing.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry, I deviate. Yeah, it's unsolved mysteries in that show. I just couldn't do it.
So,
Anyways,
I guess-
I'm sorry. I've
Did anyone in your family watch this, or did you just kind of stumble onto it if it was casually in the
I
background?
think I don't think it was like a religious thing. Like we were sitting around.
Did your
this.
family have a show that they watched religiously?
No, I can't remember. Like not like this, but sorry.
Yeah.
All right, we can move on.
Okay.
I've hit this every time that I don't
I know.
care
I
for
just
this
don't
show.
think people realize sometimes like the pivotal decade of the 90s where there was one television in a house. Usually the parents had control over what was on. And it was like a central thing in a family to like sit down. There was no streaming services to binge watch anything. So families got really comfortable planning this as part of their.
But you knew what was on television too, and
yeah.
you knew what time it was on. And on top of it, like you had to pay attention to the time in the house.
Yeah.
Because if like the show that you wanted to watch came on
And
at
you missed
7:00,
Yeah.
and you missed it, there's no on demand to watch it the next day. Like I mean, I literally my brother worked. He worked at a grocery store, and he really got into that show, Lewis and Clark, the Superman show. That was a TV show.
Lewis and Clark, like the Explorers?
No, sorry. Lois and Clark. Lewis and Clark. So,
I was like, wait,
yeah.
what? Okay,
No,
so
no, no,
Lewis
no.
and Clark.
Dude. Yeah, had a rough one with that one. No, yeah. I think that's what it was called. And it was the one, and that actress, she played Lois. Anyways, there was a TV show that ran for several seasons, and he would make us record it with the VCR. And we, for years, had like all these episodes because he was working during that time. And like, because if you missed an episode, you had, and it's not like they then played them in order in the summer. Like,
No.
you were tough out of luck
Yeah, absolutely.
for the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. And these shows ran from September till May.
Yeah.
So if you missed you missed an episode, man, that was rough.
Yeah. Yeah, the only show I remember watching religiously as a family was we watched Home Improvement as a family.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And I think it was because there was always this like weird circulated rumor that you were going to actually see the guy behind the fence, the neighbor.
Oh, yeah. Everyone wanted to see.
And it was like, oh, it's going to happen. And so we'd watch. And then the other one was Bob Saget's America's Funniest Home Videos.
Oh, yeah, we did. We watched that 7 o'clock on Sunday evening. At
Yeah,
least
that's the thing. It
on
was
the
on
West Coast.
It was on Sunday nights. So, you know, we do our Sunday activities, church, what have you not. And then everyone would get in their pajamas and then we would watch, you know, America's Funniest Home Videos with Bob Saget. And then we'd go to bed.
Yeah.
I know.
A funny story about America's. Well, no, we're just getting out. We haven't even, like, dude. All right, we'll keep moving.
We'll save that one for another day.
Yeah,
I think it's important in our podcast, if there's anyone listening to this who maybe didn't grow up in the 90s, it was a very different time. Typically, there was one television in the house. If you were lucky enough to have basic cable, like...
No, we didn't have cable.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so you had bunny ears, so you had very limited choices on what you were going to watch, and it became just something that families tended to do together. And so these were ingrained in part of our childhoods, these different TV shows and things like that. So that's kind of important. I always think to have context as to how some of us true crime enthusiasts got into true crime was likely our parents having shows like Unsolved Mysteries, Rescue 911. That was medical stuff, though, I think.
Yeah, that wasn't so much. That wasn't true crime.
But
That was just
Dateline,
crazy
all of
calls.
those kinds of things were involved and constantly in the background of our childhood. Okay, so this episode, we start out February 19th, 1982, in a quiet residential community in Woodstockton, Rhode Island. Woodsocket, excuse me. Woodsocket, Rhode Island.
Like the tool.
It is a cool name. This town was a sleepy little community with very little issues of crime. And they were stunned to find out that day that there had a savage murder had taken place. Around 3:30 that day, Doug Heath, who was a tenant of an apartment complex, returned home from work. As Doug walked through the back door, he found a little girl, 3 years old. Her name was Nicole. She was the daughter of a woman named Susan. Nicole was locked out of her apartment, and when he asked her why she was standing alone on the stairs, she said that her mom was downstairs lying down. In the East Coast, just real quick, so I think a lot of people understand, this seemed like it was a house that had been split into.
I was trying to figure this out because, when they were reenacting and they were showing, like, and the way, like, they were talking about how people were moving around in there, like, I was like, okay.
It's like the hallways and the staircase and the basement were this kind of communal property.
Yeah, and I was like, this clearly is not an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Well, because then they go on to say that the tenant, one of the tenants is the owner who was trying to rent out one of the apartments. Like, I was like, okay. I was like, yeah. I saw this. I lived in Indiana, and I saw this a lot. I've never lived on the East Coast, but I think it's probably a lot more common over there. Anyone that is, if they ever listen to this, that's on the East Coast, they'll be like,
yeah, they take these old homes.
They take these older homes and they bust them up into 4 or 5 apartments. That's what I'm guessing this kind of is. But I was trying to figure this out too as they were talking about it.
Yeah. So I think that kind of gives some background on how, and I think too, like how people knew each other. I think we lived in apartment complexes up in Portland, Oregon. They were huge. I don't know who any of my neighbors were. I would have not known if some child,
No.
but this seemed like a much smaller little community.
No.
So Doug went down the hallway and tried to open the door into Susan's apartment, but actually found out that it was locked. So he went down to the laundry room to see if Susan was down there. He got down there and he saw a body basically sitting between the washer and dryer. However, the body was so covered in blood, he couldn't tell who it was. He turned, and to the left, he saw Susan lying face down in a puddle of blood. He immediately went upstairs and called the police. Doreen was pronounced dead at the scene. She was the young lady between the washer and dryer. She had been beaten and strangled with her own sweater. Susan was unconscious and in critical condition. Susan was in surgery for 2.5 hours, during which they actually had to put a fiberglass plate into her skull. While she clung to life, Ernie, her husband, sat and prayed and waited. The doctors had described to him that she was hanging by a thread, and that her injuries were so severe that it would be touch and go for quite a while. Susan survived, but she actually remained in a deep coma. Out of concern for her safety, she was assigned 24-hour protection from the local police while she recovered in the hospital. It was kind of a common fear, I guess, from not only detectives, but also from her family, that the attacker would realize that Susan had survived and would be able to wake up and identify.
I thought it was, I thought they're, because they explained it and they're like, hey, he,
all intents and purposes.
They said the scene looked like he'd beaten them. And
he left them
for
assuming
dead.
that they were dead. Yeah,
and so
exactly.
They were worried that if they found out she was still alive, that
Yeah, and it's not like this was a huge town.
No, I think it said it was 40,000 people at the time.
So people are going to be aware. 30 days later, she was in a coma for a month.
Yeah, that's all.
I cannot
that's
even
crazy.
Imagine. She finally came out of her coma, but she had no memory of her attack or her attacker. And when this episode was recorded, it had been 5 years since the attack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in the 5 years since the attack, she has not gained any of memory whatsoever of what happened that day.
She says it. She doesn't remember, because this was on February 19th. She says she doesn't remember from New Year's till that.
So that kind of leads into the very next part of the episode. Kind of gives us a little bit more starting of that day.
Yeah.
So Susan, up until this point, has no memory from New Year's Eve, 1981 to February 19th, 1982, on the day that the attack happened. Thankfully, she had actually had lunch with her sister that day. So she had been with somebody that morning and afternoon. Her sister's name was Carol. At 1:30, 2 male friends came to the door. When Susan returned from the doorway, she stuck her head into the parlor where her sister, at least in the reenactment, was folding clothes, and said, "Hey, Carol, I'm going downstairs. I'll be right back." Susan actually did come back upstairs, but Carol had heard her talking to somebody in the doorway. So Carol got up to see who she was talking to. Carol recognized one of the men, but did not recognize the second gentleman she talked to. Susan introduced them all to each other. The men then went into the basement to look at some puppies that Susan was selling. Susan talked to them for 4 or 5 minutes. They left, and 10 minutes later, around 1:45, Carol went home. So that's the last record we have of what happened that day for Susan before the attack. So the missing time frame that we have is between 1:45 and 3:20 that day. according to the detectives, the brutality of the crime did not seem like maybe a simple assault. It seemed more like a brutalized overkill attack. So it does, at least at this point in the TV show, the detectives haven't, it's not seeming that someone just kind of walked in on something happening and someone assaulted somebody and left. It seemed like a very targeted and aggressive attack.
Yeah.
And this part, the attacker left the murder weapon, which was a 28-inch metal pipe that it seems like he had found in the house. And the detectives didn't find it for 4 days.
Well, yeah. You know what I thought?
What?
Clearly, CSI hasn't been invented yet. That's why he left it. They didn't sit around on Sunday evening and watch CSI.
They did not watch CSI.
So he clearly made a huge blunder there by leaving the murder weapon.
Well, but I mean, the police, 4 days?
Know. I don't get it. I don't get it.
What's this giant metal pipe doing here? Could this have anything to do with the women downstairs that were beaten?
I don't know.
I know. I just thought that was an interesting thing that Unsolved Mysteries slipped in there that I was like, huh, that seems like a little bit of an oversight.
Sorry, we're going to get sidetracked here for a second. But
okay.
Can we just acknowledge that this show would not fly today?
Oh,
and this is why. Because the details and the way that, one, they leave out so many things, and they skim over so many things, or they say things so nonchalant. Like, people are so invested in, like, once they start hearing a story, they want to know all of it, right? And it doesn't matter. Like, this show would never fly because it is just, sometimes it's so vague.
Yeah.
And even though they know more than what they say on the show, like, sometimes they don't even bring it up.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to me. I was like, dude, whoa, no, this wouldn't happen. Sorry. All right, I got sidetracked.
You're fine. So, the only other person who saw the attacker was, of course, Susan's 3-year-old daughter, which breaks my heart. She was in the apartment that afternoon. So, the episode shows the grandmother comes over to the apartment right away after this attack has taken place, naturally. She tried to coax some information out about the attacker from the 3-year-old. I understand 100% the grandma's intent.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can get that, obviously, you know.
Trying to get some information out of it. It's hard. It's a 3-year-old. If you've never had a conversation with a 3-year-old, let alone a 3-year-old who obviously just witnessed likely something traumatic.
Something horrible.
Exactly. So, from the very beginning, Nicole, at least at this point, told her grandmother that she let the gentleman in. She thought that it was one of Susan's friends. Nicole said that the attacker was a bit bigger than Ernie. He had a mustache. He wore jeans, sneakers, and he had his hat with the visor turned back. She said that when she heard her mother crying, she went downstairs, and as she was going downstairs, the gentleman was coming up the stairs. That he had a rag in his back pocket. It was red and white with polka dots. She looked in the hallway while he escaped, likely through the front. So that's actually how they believe she got locked out of the apartment. And that the red and white polka dots was actually probably blood splatter. Yeah. Nicole was questioned extensively by the local police department, but unfortunately her story changed way too much to actually be of any real value to the police.
Yeah, because it's a 3-year-old.
So one of the things that made this case so complicated was the fact that the two victims had very different backgrounds and situations, or in other terms of what we call today, victimology. So a little bit of my amateur true crime. Victimology is actually a term used to study how a victim was living their life and the things and people that they came in contact to that allowed this situation to happen to them. Not blaming the victim, but what were the people that they kind of... How their paths crossed. Exactly. So for these two people, we have very different... We have one girl who was single, or I guess she had a boyfriend, so she wasn't married, no kids, going to school, living a very different life. And then we have, Susan, who the story mainly focuses on her, even though she wasn't the one that passed away. She was married, had children. So a lot of these things were hard to track down because how did these victims end up in the same place where they were both attacked? Did it come from one person, from the other? They had a huge pool of people to interview.
Yeah, and
in fact,
their past
one of them was advertising in the newspaper for puppies for sale. The other woman had a news article out as well for an apartment for rent. So they had a big, big, big thing to kind of take on. That was one of the aspects that made this so complicated. Susan and her family biggest fear was that the attacker might come back for her since she had woken up. And that's kind of how the story ends on...
I did find it interesting.
Okay.
That it says Doreen
was the murder victim.
Doreen was the one that died. Mm-hmm. That her family was kind of doing their own investigation, their own independent investigation.
Yeah, they didn't go into much detail about that.
And it didn't appear, it didn't appear they talked a lot in the episode.
Yeah, just that Doreen's family then started getting threatening phone calls.
I found it interesting that the dad says that every time they would kind of push a little bit more in the public or do stuff, they'd get a phone call. Mm-hmm. He said they got a phone call at 2 a.m. and kind of threatening them to leave it and drop it.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, so it seemed like ultimately both of these families were kind of looking over their shoulders all the time. Because we have Doreen, whose family was pushing to get this case solved. And then we have Susan, who survived the attack, has amnesia, which I feel like is a plot of several 80s movies as well.
Yeah. This really felt like a movie plot.
Yeah.
And that's not to take away.
But I feel like that was something like either soap operas in the 80s and or movies. Like someone always had amnesia of some sort.
That was a big thing back then.
And I don't have a lot to relate that to. The only thing, and actually I thought about this. Oh, excuse me, I bumped my mic. I thought about this today when I was watching the episode. A while back, I had a brain surgery, and I don't have any memory from the morning of the surgery up until I want to say, you were telling me a story the other day about when I woke up from the surgery, and I don't remember that. I don't remember having a conversation with you. I don't remember interacting with you. I remember nothing. And that's common for the drug that they use to put you under for something and going through something hard or traumatic that your brain just doesn't grasp that. And that to me is scary that I lost that X amount of hours. I cannot imagine losing months.
Yeah.
And holding the key to solving a murder. Giving this family answers. And to also not have to worry about looking behind your back all the time.
It was a strange one.
It was. So obviously the mystery here was that the amnesia and the murder. Exactly.
And amnesia.
Did you do any research on this one?
No, I'm really excited about this.
Okay.
because they give the update.
Mm-hmm.
They give an update.
Mm-hmm.
They name the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets sentenced.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says he was released.
Yep.
So I have some theories. Okay, not theories. I don't know. I'm really excited because you told me to do 2 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty excited to hear what this is all about because I will say this was an interesting story.
Yes.
The way it was put out there, I was like, ooh, this is a mystery.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the name, and the last name is not any of the spouses or family member names.
No.
So have no idea how this name is tied.
Okay. So I can give you some answers, not all.
All right, I'm ready for it.
This episode, or this case in particular, probably almost in a way, you could do a full episode on if you wanted to focus on the trial aspects and like the post issues.
Okay.
Because we have affairs.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. We have got Susan was best friends with this woman who this was the man that was arrested and convicted was her husband. Like, it gets very complicated very quickly. I spent quite a bit of time reading a bunch of different news articles, all kinds of things on trying to, and I didn't want to get into the weeds about the sort of maybe what led up to this or the speculations or anything at all like that, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, a woman lost her life. Susan actually admits that she actually had a few affairs on her husband, but she doesn't remember the names of the men that she had affairs with due to her amnesia. I'm like, that's so ultimately there was a gentleman, his last name was Tempest. He was convicted of second-degree murder in 1982 of the death of 22-year-old Doreen. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison, but always maintained his innocence. However, his conviction was vacated in 2015
Really?
for a Brady violation. Do you know what a Brady violation is?
It eludes me right now.
Okay. So a Brady violation is when it is found that the prosecutors did not disclose all of the evidence, right? It's based on a court case where the last name of the gentleman was Brady. So in turn, it's been set that this Brady violation. So the hard part is that Brady violations are like an automatic, like, you're done. Like, the prosecutor failed to do their part by disclosing all the information that they have. You are almost guaranteed a new trial if you can prove that there was the violation had taken place. And the prosecutor suppressed details about changed witness statements. So that was in 2015. He gets released. Okay, this poor family. December 18th, 2017, Tempest was convicted again of second-degree murder in the death of
So they retried him.
No, they did not retry him. So he entered an Alford plea. Do you know what an Alford plea is?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you. An Alford plea means that you are maintaining your innocence. However, you are acknowledging that the prosecutor has enough evidence on you that if you went to court, you would likely be convicted.
That's the dumbest thing. You're literally saying, I'm innocent, but I think I'm gonna get pinned for this, so sure, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, and Alford is the name of another court
Clearly.
case. There are several like deep dive podcasts you can go in on listening to, the Brady violations and the Alford
I'm
plea and stuff
probably
like
not
that
gonna
that
do
gives a
that.
good background. So Tempest entered an Alford plea on Monday to the second-degree murder. The plea basically has the same effects of a guilty plea, but he gets to maintain his innocence. Here's the caveat, though. He was released as on time served.
Oh, that's probably why he took the
That's
plea.
probably why he took the plea. And his pompous lawyer gets on as like, my client is innocent and has maintained his innocence. He could have gotten parole many a times, blah, blah, blah.
So
And
how did they get him though?
that, so there
Because it was
was,
5. At this point, it's been 5 years. So
mhm.
like, what evidence? Like,
So
what
from
did they
what I
have?
read, it seems as if this Tempest gentleman, now I didn't go through and read any of the court case files from the first conviction. He was actually pegged right from the start.
That he was a suspect.
That
They
he was
just
a
didn't have
suspect.
enough.
However, Tempest had a very big mouth on him. And multiple people within the community came forward that he often bragged about doing this. So that's at least, from my understanding, what got the ball rolling. Now, what happened in court, what was suppressed, how everything played out, I don't know.
I'm just curious because like they put it out there on the show that like they had 0. They had no idea. No idea. You know what I was thinking? Mob. That's what I was thinking.
It was a mob hit. Well, I wondered.
I was
and
like, I thought I was like,
from my
man, I was like,
understanding, Tempest might have been one of the gentlemen who came to look at the puppies with his buddy.
no, but so then are they saying, so Tempest was involved with Susan, supposedly. So
Yeah.
Doreen is just an
And
innocent
Susan was also the maid
bystander.
of honor at their wedding.
So they were friends.
Yeah. And I mean, you want to talk
Clearly.
about one of the oldest reasons for murder?
Yeah, I get that. But so Susan and
Tempest.
yeah, first name was Raymond. I wrote that down. Susan and Raymond are involved.
Yes.
So how does Doreen come into it?
It sounds like she might have
She's just
been
at the wrong place at the wrong
Yeah.
time.
And her poor family had to go through several years of waiting, hoping that they would figure out who this was. Then he was convicted. Then the conviction was overturned. And now, because he entered an Alford plea, he maintains innocence. So we don't have anyone ever saying this is what happened that day.
So is it amnesia?
Yeah.
Come on.
So you're wondering if she really didn't have amnesia, but she just didn't want to open up the can of worms about having the
All
affair.
her affairs.
I actually never thought about that. That is an interesting take on this.
Because
Well, when I was first watching the episode, I was like, 2 gentlemen came by the apartment more than once. Because she left to go. It was kind of confusing.
I don't know.
Introduced her sister to these people, went downstairs, someone talked, da, 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 da. I was like, so we've got 2 men in the area. And the sister-in-law says, or the sister says she knows one of the gentlemen.
She says she recognizes one of them, but then that's it. That's all they talk about on that. So I was like, okay, so, I mean, I guess I thought like they're laying out the timeline of the day, right? But she's having multiple affairs on her husband.
Yeah.
One of them ends up,
yeah, so that's an interesting, actually, I never even thought, because there's no way to like prove someone has amnesia or doesn't.
Yeah. I know. But how many cases of amnesia have you ever heard of?
Well, according to the 80s, it was like a
I
big,
know in the 80s it happened a lot. A lot, a lot.
yeah.
It's in all the movies.
Yeah, it's in all of the movies.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's a really sad case. It seems like this poor girl. She was actually moving out that day,
Yeah, I know. That was one thing that
and
came
it
up.
seems like she was homecoming queen. It seemed like she had a really bright future. Was excited to go to school, and was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it cost her her life, and it ended in a very violent, brutal way.
Well, here's the thing. I'm just throwing ideas out here.
Mm-hmm.
But you've had affairs. You probably feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that lives. This girl's an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
She ends up dying kind of because of, well, the only person that's responsible is this guy. But like this whole
Her
thing,
technically Susan's victimology, quote unquote, brought this gentleman
yeah,
into this
that
woman's life.
she,
Yes.
because of her life, these are the reasons these paths have crossed. So, I'm sure that there was some guilt felt there, some responsibility, if she knew it was him. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not. All right. Are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
It is a good one.
All right. Picture this. You got this just snazzy dude walking down the street in New York City.
Can I just describe him while you're setting the scene?
Well, dark, tall, and handsome. Is that what you're going to describe?
No.
Because, that's what he is. Okay. All right.
Don't ask any questions.
Yeah. I mean, don't open your eyes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we got tall, dark, and handsome walking down the street in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
All he's carrying is a garment bag with a suit. He's looking for.
He's a man of mystery.
He's a man of mystery. He's just here.
Mm-hmm. He just
make a
blew
name,
into town
to make a name for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask about his past. Okay. He's called Heart Attacker. Okay. The Heart Attacker. And who I'm talking about here is Louis Carlucci.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Carlucci. If that's not a New York name, I don't know what is. All right.
But with a name like Heart Attacker,
that's his nickname.
You would think, in your mind, you're picturing tall, dark, and handsome.
I'm sure he is.
Oh no, we see his.
I know what he looks like, but let me tell you what this guy has done. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So Unsolved Mysteries lays it out. This man, he's rolling in New York. He's coming from somewhere nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's. He's
also, like, what a time to be alive, right? Where you could roll into town and no one had any way of figuring out who you were. Yep.
All right. Honestly, they roll it out that he is the mystery.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah.
This heart attacker, Louis Carlucci, rolls into a neighborhood of New York City. Mm-hmm. It's called Forest Hills. I don't know where that's at.
It said it was a very affluent neighborhood. Yeah.
And gets a place. Starts working at a diner, and let me tell you, he's on the hunt. Mm-hmm. He's on the prowl. Okay, goes to a bar, meets a lady named Susan. Oh,
nope,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Sorry, Susan was from the last story.
Yeah,
Barbara. Barbara's there with her friend, and he says, "Let me buy you a drink." He sends
two drinks over. Yeah.
And then he comes on over and he starts talking to him. Do you know what Barbara has to say about Louis Carlucci?
I know.
Wrote it down.
I also wrote it down.
Tell me what she says about Louis Carlucci.
That he had no style and no class.
Okay.
That was my best attempt at a really
that was. I
Bronx, New Jersey, something, New York accent.
She says it. You know,
No style, no class.
no class. So do you know what that means? That means they get married 7 weeks later. That's what that means.
The jump from no style, no
They
class.
literally jump from that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and this is why, okay, side note. When men attempt to buy women drinks at the bar, I don't know if it's like a weird social norm where we feel this weird need to have a conversation with them or give them a benefit out, but I've been out with my friends on several occasions and men have offered to, oh, can I get you a drink or this, that. I'm married, so I'm obviously not interested, but even if I was like, no, do not buy me a drink. I do not want to be obligated to small talk you. I do not want to be obligated to hear about your story or your life or what brought
that's
you
because
here.
you've been living with me for too long.
I don't want to hear anything about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to feel like because you spent $12.13 on a drink for me and my friends that you are entitled to have an ounce of my time.
This is the 80s. There's no internet. There's no, like, the only way to meet people.
Yeah, this was probably a very, very common way to meet people.
Is
you are
church and a
true.
bar.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I'm sure buying a drink is probably a smooth.
That's the icebreaker.
Yeah.
That's the icebreaker. Hey, let me buy you a drink. I mean, it's still an
But
icebreaker
this
to this day.
poor woman let this man buy her a drink, and 7 weeks later, they're married.
7 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, from no style, no class to, you know, he put a ring on it. You know? I mean, like.
Not even, engaged. 7 weeks later, they were married in the bar that they met at.
So, Barbara tells a story that they get married 7 weeks later, and instantly,
like the day of the wedding, like at the reception,
he goes crazy, and he's controlling. He is
dominant, aggressive,
dominant,
all the things,
And Louis Carlucci starts milking her dry of all of her money. And, like, she said she felt captive, like a prisoner in her own place.
He followed her into the bathroom.
Yeah, he never left her side. He wouldn't let her talk to anyone. And whenever they went out, he used her money. He maxed out her credit cards. And then he pretty much drained her savings account of $20,000.
And?
What's that?
I adjusted it for inflation.
Oh, did you? Okay.
You told me you wanted me to.
Yeah. So let me give this. I'm going to say that's about $75,000 today.
You're not too far off. $69,000.
$69,000. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So $20,000 in savings was drained. About $69,000 today.
So he drains her of savings of 20 grand. And then he just packs his case and he walks off into the sunset.
She got a razor out.
Yeah.
She was going to attempt suicide. He found her doing so and basically said, well, you're going to die either way. Either you're just going to kill yourself or you're just going to wilt away into nothing. I think AKA he knew she was out of money at that point.
Yeah, he'd milked
but he
her.
blamed it on her.
Of course.
Packed up his stuff, peaced out.
So he milks her dry.
Within 6 months, he'd taken everything from her.
They get married. Within 6 months, he's milked her dry of all of her money, maxed out all of her credit cards, packs his bag, and goes off into the distance to not be seen by Barbara ever again. So she's feeling pretty down on herself, pretty embarrassed, but her friends talk her into, hey, you need to go to the police. And I'll say this, detective takes it seriously.
I was very surprised. New York police officer in the 80s had a lot going on. I mean, New York in the 80s was rough.
So he investigates it.
He like his heart breaks where he talks about that not only did this guy do financial damage, but that this woman was psychologically damaged and broken from him.
Yeah. So he digs into it. Comes to find out, Heartbreaker. He's been all over. He's been all over. They said that he'd they attract him to L.A., Las Vegas, Florida, all over the country. And that, come to find out, Barbara's not his first victim.
Mm-mm.
He is married up to, at this point in the show, it's gotten bigger.
Oh, yeah, it has. Yeah, I saw that. But when they were showing us this.
He's married 9 people, and he has fathered 30 kids.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? And he's conned all these women out of money.
They said more than $1 million.
Yeah, at that point.
Adjusted for inflation.
2.2.
3.4.
3.4. I was way off on that one. Whew,
and
off.
Technically had not divorced a single one of them.
No.
So some of these women, are still legally married to him.
Polygamy's back.
But this is polygamy, not by consent, though. Consent is key. And again, okay, time out. This is, unfortunately, we'll learn more about this. This is still going on to this day.
Well,
Men going out there in many, but we hear this story over and over again, right?
I mean, obviously, this is not an uncommon story. I mean, this is a pretty
sad.
common story, but now it's just evolved. Men are doing it to women online. That's happening a lot. This is your bait, a catfish.
Yeah, catfish, all of the things. What's crazy is that most of these gentlemen that are doing this now, a lot of them actually are pretty good looking guys, or at least and appear to have it all together. They are your typical tall, dark, and handsome.
Are you trying to say that the Heartbreaker is not good looking?
No.
What?
No. He was not a good looking guy.
Listen, I know from a good source that you can't get a nickname like Heartbreaker without being tall, dark, and handsome. Okay?
It just, once again, this has happened every single episode. Some man does something and convinces some woman to do something that puts herself in a bad situation or drains her bank account or makes her help rob her convenience store she works at, whatever it is. And I keep thinking, at bare minimum, that this gentleman must have at least some way had some appeal. And then they show his picture and you're like,
what happened? How did we get here?
How did we get here?
And my question, how did he get so many?
But that's the thing. He's not good looking. He doesn't seem to have any income. I mean, he has no education, no prospect, no nothing that you would consider my checklist man, ding, 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 ding.
I mean, he marries Barbara and he's a cook at a diner. I don't know. I don't get it.
One suit.
Yeah, with a suit.
And not a pretty face.
He had a good mustache, though.
Well, it was the 80s.
It was the 80s. Yes. All right, we'll establish it.
Yeah.
Not good looking.
Not good looking.
Bigger gentleman.
Yeah.
And not a good looking fella.
Yeah. So what's our updates? So,
yeah, I wanted to keep this one kind of brief. He's going around, he's marrying a bunch of women, taking them for all they're worth, and then he just up and leaves, and he heads off to a new place. So I will say, the detective in New York, he takes it seriously. He puts out a warrant for this guy's arrest, and they're trying to track him down. They track him down in Nashville originally, arrest him. The night
of the original broadcast. It wasn't the detective that tracked him down. It was Unsolved Mysteries. Someone reported him.
Yeah, no, I'm saying he was tracked down. He was arrested in Nashville. He's sent back to New York. He's extradited back to New York. He goes before the judge, gets $1,000 bail. Guess what? He doesn't show back up. Yeah. He disappears again. So they actually broadcast this guy 3 times on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
This one, and then he doesn't go to court, so they broadcast it again. and he's picked up in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
He's then extradited to New York again.
And every single time he's found, he has another lover.
He's got another one. He's got
Yeah.
like I think it said he was up to like 12 or 15 women by this time.
Yeah.
He's sent back to New York. He gets convicted.
Mm-hmm.
He's sentenced to 4 years. Does 2.
Yeah.
Gets released.
This guy, he must have some charisma because he keeps getting away with everything. And then even when he's caught, it's like he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So then, come to find out, he finds a new lady.
Mm-hmm. Miss Roxanne.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually is then in on it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're into the 90s.
Yep.
And she convinces her family that she's married this guy.
Yep.
He has cancer. They need help for medical bills, blah, blah, blah. So they send him money. They wire money to them. Well, it's all a
All
con.
a scam. Yeah.
So again, they go to the police. They send out a warrant for his arrest. He gets arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And he does some time for that one.
10 months.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, ladies. I have to break the bad news to you.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2005, the Heartbreaker died.
Bye.
He passed away. I don't know what from.
A heart attack.
That was a good one. Yeah. But yeah, Heartbreaker is now dead. But I know this is such a surprise. But he continued to run that scam pretty much for his entire life.
Yeah, his entire life. He
goes to jail, doesn't do much time. Oh yeah, I guess he did get released in New York. He was supposed to be on probation for 2 more years. He jumps that. He ends up going back and doing a little bit of time.
But I mean, why?
for
There's
that,
never any
like,
consequences.
that's
The
what I mean,
guy
like, they don't.
swindled $3+ million. Never really had to work as far as like a
Well, that's
9
the
to
thing.
5 job, and at the most, he served a couple years in prison.
Couple years in prison for $3 million.
Yeah, as Brian Regan says,
If you can't do the crime, don't do the time. I
got the time
got
for
the time
that.
for that.
You're telling me that I can have $3 million and it's going to cost me 2 years in
2
prison?
years of house and board and food.
Done.
He probably,
I got the time for that.
He's not like in a supermax, you know.
No, and what is sad is, to this day, there's been several documentaries widely released on this sort of same sweetheart swindlers things. Most of these men that do these scams and these swindles rarely ever face any charges. Because technically, a lot of these women gave the money, quote unquote, freely.
Well, and the police did say, like, they said it was hard because even though he'd done this and they knew about it, a lot of women were unwilling to, like,
and that's the other thing, the
charges
shame that
on
goes
him
along with
because
it.
they feel embarrassed. And, you know, and I get it. It is
Absolutely.
embarrassing. And that's unfortunate because then he's never going to really, like, suffer any consequences. But, you know, and unfortunately, because it's not, there's no, like, violence behind it. Like, there's just not a lot of, you know, hard punishments for stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, yeah, like you said.
It's a hard crime because a lot of women, and, you know, I think anyone that's probably been scammed or swindled in any way, shape, or form, the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment of something happening keeps people from even reporting it, which then just perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah.
So,
but that's your heartbreaker.
bye, loser.
Yeah.
So, 43-year-old.
Oh, this is a good one. I enjoyed this one.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Diane Broadbeck lived in a small town in Pennsylvania. She was a wife, she was a mother, and most importantly, she was a devout Christian. On Saturday, April 5th, 1986, this woman disappears. Gone. A month later, this devout Christian woman's car was found abandoned in a motel parking lot 30 minutes from her home. The police found her overnight bag in the trunk. Ironically, the same day that Diana vanished, a 48-year-old man named John, a former teacher and long-term inmate at a local prison, escaped. He was serving a life sentence for the brutal murder of one of his students, 18-year-old Pamela Sue Reimer. At the exact time he escaped, Diana was seen just 1.5 miles from the prison, driving along the same country road that he vanished. This sounds like a mystery.
Maybe. I mean, I think it's a pretty obvious mystery.
So, local authorities believe that she may have been an accomplice. However, her family, mostly her mother and sister, are mystified. How that conclusion.
They don't believe it.
Nope, they do not believe it whatsoever.
Don't believe it.
She was respectably married, which I thought was such an interesting term.
25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Long time.
She was a happy woman and would have never vanished without a word. However, though, instantly her husband in this interview was like, man, I believe she did it. And he says that with not a single expression on his face. He seemed like he was a fun guy.
Dude,
this
that
man
guy's
is.
world just got
I
rocked.
understand that, but it seemed like it
Rocked.
affected him in exactly 0 ways.
I
I don't think this man has ever used an exclamation mark in his life.
No, he looked like he just gotten rocked.
You and I saw it very differently. He looked like he had 0 expressions. He just very mild, matter of fact, monotone, was like very like, I believe she did it.
He said that he said didn't understand. He thought they'd had 25
He was
good
under the
years.
impression that they were
That they'd had
things were pretty
25
good.
real good years.
Yeah, that was his impression on it. So a little background on Diana. Her and her husband Chester had 2 daughters. They had celebrated, as you said, their 25th wedding anniversary. She had worked as a bank manager and avidly pursued an interest in psychology. I couldn't find that she actually had any formal education or training on it, or if it was just something she enjoyed studying.
Well, that's what you called people back then that were into true crime.
No. You're saying she was a pre-true crime enthusiast?
She was before true crime was a
We
thing.
all just considered people who were interested in psychology.
Yeah.
She was involved in many community activities, one of which included writing letters to prisoners who had no friends or family.
The best part is, okay, they reveal this, okay?
Super casual, no big deal. That this was like a women's church group
thing,
or something.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's take the most manipulative people that are in prison and some of the most ignorant, naive church-going. I mean, like, these avid Christian women, bless their hearts, probably assume innocence of everybody. And let's put them in contact with each other. Let's see what happens.
This is the part that was great in the show, okay? They lay out the story that this guy has escaped. She goes missing. She's a part of the church. And that, oh, by the way, side note, she was writing to prisoners. And then they interview her sister. And she says that her sister...
It's a God-fearing woman.
That she was writing letters. She knew she was writing letters. And she's like, oh, no, she wouldn't run off with him. She wouldn't do that. So I'm like, this doesn't take... this is not a mystery. We and the mom and the sister are like, no, like okay, really?
Yeah.
Do I have to write this down for you? Do you not see what just happened? No,
The denial in those two was strong.
it was they were firm believers.
Firm believers.
Firm believers in their sister and daughter.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right.
So, and I know that there is still to this day, we watch Love After Lockup sometimes when we want to just have a good laugh. There is a thing about women writing inmates. I don't get it.
You haven't delved into that lifestyle?
No, I haven't. And I have been a part of a lot of church communities growing up. I had lots of friends. I never once saw a group of church women that their job was to write male inmates of a prison.
I think that program in churches died out in the 80s and 90s.
They're like, you know what we should not do?
I think they saw that might not have been the best thing.
It's funny that you said the pre-true crime thing with the psychology. So a little backstory on me.
Okay.
My senior year of high school.
You went into psychology.
No, I was very interested in crime and solving things, but I was absolutely not interested in any way, shape, or form becoming a police officer. Mostly because I don't like the uniforms and I don't like to run. So 2 things which are kind of important to be in law enforcement. So on my senior exit project that you had to talk about at the very beginning of your year, the teachers were aware of the things that some of these students were trying to do, and you tried to kind of find ways to connect and stuff. I was dead set that I was going to work inside the world of law enforcement, and I wanted to try to become a prison warden. I wanted to be in charge of a prison and work with inmates and all of this stuff. And I had this amazing social studies teacher who heard about this, and I cannot describe to you how much of a teacher's pet and perfectionist I was in school. I did not get detention.
Interesting.
I did not. I was not a bad student. I was not a bad kid. I did not make problems. I did not cause issues. I did not do a lot of things in the world of under my school roof that would not reflect positively upon myself. And my teacher was a part of the Scared Straight quote unquote program.
The Scared Straight.
I know. Which I think we figured out doesn't really do anything anymore.
Yeah.
But for the people who don't know, Scared Straight was a program where troubled teens that were causing problems in high schools could basically spend a day at a prison. Now, the program that we did was not like where you like moved into the prison and got yelled at.
No, I mean, they were just supposed to, the convicts were supposed to talk to them and tell them, don't do this,
Yeah.
get your life turned around, you're going to end up like me, pretty much.
Tangent to the tangents. We went through the DARE program.
Yeah.
We went through the STAR program. Did you do that one?
No.
So we did. It was called Students Today Aren't Ready for Sex. You didn't do that one?
No.
Not only did I go through that program, I also taught it because I was big about leadership and I was like camp counselor and all that stuff. So I went back and taught the STARS program to other kids. And it was 100% abstinence. There was absolutely zero other ways to prevent pregnancy. And this was taught in junior high. The STARS program was. And then we had the Scared Straight program. They really thought, and all of these were all scare tactics. Like, let's tell people the worst thing that could possibly happen to them, and maybe that's going to wake these people up. Now, for me, that works. If you tell me that there is a small possibility that if I make a mistake that something extremely dangerous is going to happen, I'm not touching it. So anyways, we had the Scared Straight program in our school, and we got to go up to Oregon State Penitentiary, which had a death row. My social studies teacher knew that I was interested in the prison life and wanting to work as up into becoming a warden And he obviously saw in me that that likely wasn't going to work out well. And
I'm so shocked by this
so
story.
he approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in accompanying them. I'd have to go with all of like the bad kids. We had to ride a 3.5 hour bus ride up there. And of course, I was super excited. Like, I get to go into the prison. I get to see, like, this is what I want to do for a living. And I had all of these rules I had to follow. You couldn't even like wear perfume or anything at all like that. We went in and spent the day with death row inmates. And we went in and we sat and we talked to them. And I left very sad at the end of the day because I realized that at one point or another, I believed none of these men talked to us about like not getting into this situation. All they did was tell us how innocent they were and how they were wrongfully convicted and it's not their fault.
I'm so shocked.
I believed hook, line, and sinker every single one of their stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will say I'm grateful enough that I had the insight at that age to be like, maybe this isn't my path of career choice, because I'm not going to be a very good prison warden or work with criminals in any way, shape, or form if I believe everything that they say.
You believe every cock and bull story they tell you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, I had more insight into this than this woman did. And I was 17 at the time. So getting back to our story, I'm going to give you a little background on John, though, because we know about Diana, married, kids, church, all the things.
All the things.
John, little bit of a different story to get us here. In 1966, he was the, quote, popular teacher in a high school that he worked at. He was the math teacher.
We all know what that means.
Yeah. I have a problem with when people talk about the popular teachers now, because we hear a lot of things later in life about how that turns out.
You don't want that title.
No, you should not strive to be that teacher. That means that you have too close of a relationship with teenagers.
It just,
So on April...
Bad news bears.
It is bad news bears. On April 28th, he stopped and offered a ride to one of his students. Her name was Pamela. She never made it home that day. Later that afternoon, her school books were discovered beside the road, and unfortunately her body was later discovered nearby. She had been beaten with a wrench, raped, and her throat had been slit.
That's terrible.
The next day... it's a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a little over.
Yeah. The next day, John actually confessed to the murder. He claims that he killed her after she took a comment that he made in the wrong way, and that she was going to turn him into local authorities for making sexual advances on her. Just a misunderstanding.
That escalated.
Mm-hmm. However, her mother informed the police that he actually had targeted her. She had reported that he had repeatedly been driving past their house in the days leading up to this, and that she had actually made a formal request to be removed from his classroom because she was uncomfortable around him. Okay? So he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Confession.
Slam dunk case.
Yeah. In 1983, John began writing to Diana. Diana and John actually connected through a friend of hers who had been visiting him in person, was no longer able to do it, and thought that her friend Diana would be a good person to take over.
Seems like a great idea.
Mm-hmm. So Diana started visiting John at the local prison and even continued to see him after he was transferred to a different location that was over 2 hours away. Officer Walter, who was one of the corrections officers at the new prison, said that she came to see John every week without fail. And in fact, he was under the impression that she was John's girlfriend, because when they greeted each other and they said goodbye to each other, they embraced and kissed. They were very affectionate towards each other.
They said that's the only thing they're allowed to do there.
Which this must have been a low security prison, because there's a lot of prisons that's not the case. However, This woman never missed a week, and she was physically affectionate and loving and towards this gentleman in front of other people's. Obviously, the correction officer has no clue this woman's married.
Well, it's not his job.
No, it's not his job.
He didn't
But
care.
he knew who she was, and that comes into play later in this story.
No,
yeah.
And I see where that, yeah.
Okay, Ben, so do you have your phone on you?
Yes.
Okay. So I am going to text you an excerpt from a letter that John wrote to Diane, and I want you to read that to us in your daddy voice.
Hi, my precious lady. I wanted you to be close to me so much today. I hope my enjoyment and adoration of you is an incentive to be the best you can. You are a classy lady. I miss you and love you.
End scene. So
Sorry, that was not my best performance.
sorry, I did
Classy
put you
lady.
I did put you on the spot. But so that was just an example of the letter. So now we've established that this is
I do like the I hope my enjoyment and adoration of you is an incentive to be the best you can.
mm-hmm.
I'm going to text that to you every day at
Every
work.
day. But we've established that this relationship is way above and beyond
So are
this
you trying to tell me that
church
this is not
group.
a church? I'm here to help and help you
I'm
find
going to
God?
share, I got a message for you from the Lord.
Yeah.
I got to talk to you about our good Lord and Savior. No, this was not the woman doing the Lord's work. This was adultery, which last time I checked in the Christian faith is a no-no. At this point in the episode, we find out that John has repeatedly tried to overturn his conviction. He was trying to get it bumped down
All the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, he was trying to get it bumped down to second-degree murder, which would have allowed him at some point to potentially be paroled. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and he was denied.
They said no.
Nope. Nope.
Negative.
Yeah, let's remind, like, what this man did was despicable.
You didn't, I mean,
This wasn't second-degree murder. Not only was it not
it was
just
a horrific crime.
murder, exactly, and of a child.
Yeah.
No, sir, you are exactly where you need to be for the amount of time that you need to be there. 20 years of being behind bars. John, though, however, had become a model prisoner. He played organ for the choir. He mastered computer programming. He taught for the prison school. His excellent behavior had actually earned him the right, which blew my mind that he got the right to do this. I don't think that this program is probably in place anymore. To have unsupervised work outside of the prison.
That I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
How do you let someone who has a life conviction?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh, hey, this guy's got 2 years and he's got 6 months left on his bid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I can understand that because a lot of those guys are like, I just want to finish my time and go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, running just gets me longer
Mm-hmm.
and I'm almost done. This guy's got life.
Yeah.
No parole. Like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
like his parole hearing's next week. Like, and
He's got nothing to lose.
And you would allow him to just go
Yeah.
out and do some work?
Yeah, we were watching, my son and I, you might have been in the room, we're watching an A&E show, I believe, or American History show about some of the great prison escapes from around the world. And I thought they brought up a good point. Prisoners that have life in prison have nothing but time.
Yeah.
So spending 20 years becoming a model citizen inside prison and gaining the trust and the admiration of everybody around you is not lost on them. It's not a big thing for them to do. That's
all they got.
That's all they got. They got nothing else. So
Why not?
why not?
Well, now, especially, like, all of his appeals are done.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is it, man. Like, this is your future.
You're giving a man that has nothing to lose,
He's got nothing.
unsupervised work outside of the prison walls.
Yeah. I didn't understand that,
Yeah.
but all right.
So it seems like
Continue.
there was a farm close by, within about a mile of the prison, that John was set to do some work at that day. So April 5th, 1986, he was tasked to cut hay on the farm around 1 p.m. The labor foreman dropped him off, says, "Hey, I've got to go get some other people set up. Here's your instructions. Thank you, howdy doody. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you in a couple hours." And he leaves. Around that same time that day, our corrections officer, who had to witness the public display of affection between these two, is on his way to a bowling alley. It so happens to be driving down this road, and this is just a two little country lane highway, and he notices that the car that just drove past him happened to be Diana, the girlfriend of the man who's in his prison. Now, this seems like this was this guy's day off. I don't think he realized that at that point John was on a field somewhere.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, he was going to the bowling alley. And unless this was the kind of prison where they were field tripping it with the prisoners, which, you know what, so. Wouldn't surprise me. So he's driving, he makes eye contact with her, sees her, wonders what she's doing, and then just goes about his day.
Yeah.
However, 3 hours later, that's how long it takes for them to discover John's missing. The next day, state troopers actually go back to Chester's house, knock on the door, explain to him that a man named John had escaped prison and that they believed his wife had something to do with it.
Yeah, they pinned her to
right
quick.
Up top. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, obviously, a prisoner escapes. The first thing you're going to do is check out his correspondence.
Yeah.
He'd been calling her, too.
Well, and then the corrections officer's like, "I was on my way to bowling, and I saw her driving down the road."
Yeah. Well, and he called her the day before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they had a pretty obvious case here of what had happened. But Sweet Chester just said, "No, I don't believe it."
So, Chester...
He does not react in any way, shape, or form. Just says, "No, she told me that she was in Williamsburg, Virginia. She's supposed to be home tomorrow. Thank you, sirs. Have a nice day." It wasn't until the next day when she failed to come home that he says, "Oh, maybe the police were correct."
I mean, this guy, she's been visiting him every week.
I'm telling you, this man has never used an exclamation mark. I don't think he puts any emotions or...
But then also, she's been fielding phone calls from this guy. From the prison.
Which I can't imagine. I mean...
And this is before cell phones.
You could not make a call within, 15 miles of, your landline without it costing a pretty penny.
But there's just one phone at the house, and he's calling that one phone, and she's picking up, and Chester has no idea. She's making weekly visits and daily phone calls.
Did you watch Chicago with me? Ben's not a musical person.
Yeah, maybe.
So, the man in Chicago, the musical, the wife of or the husband of Roxy, Mr. Cellophane, do 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 do. He's just like this guy that is just always kind of things happen to him, and no one really it's just vanilla, I guess, right? No emotions, no reactions, vanilla. This is what this poor Chester seems to be, that he was under the impression his wife really enjoyed going out of town every once in a while. She was doing the Lord's work by writing letters to prisoners, and that they had a happy marriage for 25 years.
I mean, if you stay ignorant enough, I guess you're happy.
To the point where the police show up and say, "Hey,
your wife might have ran away with a convicted murderer," and you go,
"I don't think so. She told me she was down in Williamsburg, she wanted to see them reenact something from the Civil War. She's supposed to be home tomorrow.
I don't know.
We see no reaction of this man. He never gets angry. He also never seems sad. He is just existing. However, she did not return home the next day, so he changed his mind. The police also went on to discover a few things. Diana had set up a secret bank account. She had withdrawn $7,500 from it. She had also rented a storage facility and had put a car in it.
She bought a car and put it in there.
Yeah.
I mean, but her mom and sister still think she's
still
innocent.
think that she's innocent.
Those clues aren't good enough.
No. The other big red flags were the massive amount of telephone communication between the two.
Heck?
Yeah. Including the night before, they spent 14 minutes having a conversation. So the police had enough evidence at this point to file charges against her.
Yeah.
So now on the show, we're back to Diana's abandoned car. We've kind of gone through the whole thing. We're back to the abandoned car in the motel parking lot. They open up the trunk of the car and they find a bag containing jewelry, cosmetics.
Oh, yeah.
And, just so everyone knows, over a dozen pair of underwear.
Seems like that does seem a little excessive.
That's what made the cut for the TV show? This woman's been missing for a month.
And they're worried about how many pairs of
underwear she has. Were they concerned that it was too much? Were they concerned that it wasn't enough?
I don't know. But according to them, it's a clue.
It was some kind of clue.
Remember when I was saying that sometimes they just skim over things? That's one of them they could have skimmed over.
Or also, if you're going to say that, can we have some background?
Context. What
kind of underwear? I would even like to know that. This is a good Christian woman. What if it was some,
That was probably, yeah.
At some point, it was important enough that it made it not only into Unsolved Mysteries, but it also made it onto the police record that this woman had a dozen pair of underwear in the trunk of her car.
Underwear.
So the mystery in this episode, when it originally aired, is where is Diana?
And where's this convicted murderer?
Yeah. There was her mom and sister who were convinced that she was brainwashed and conned and being held. She was being taken against her will. She had been kidnapped and held hostage, like all of these crazy things. Then there's Diana's husband who just says, I think she's dead.
Or she's gone. I think
he said, I think she's dead because we were happily married and we have 2 kids and ain't no one heard from her. The only possible explanation is she's no longer with us. The police, however, their theory is that not only is she alive, but she likely was a big participant in this and a willing one at that. So, update. Did you hear anything about the update or anything?
I saw what it put. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple in Boise, Idaho watched the broadcast and recognized Diane as a former coworker. They knew her as Kathy. When they saw her picture, they immediately recognized Kathy and her partner, Jim, who had been living in Boise since mid-1986. The FBI opened up an investigation into Kathy and Jim. They discovered that the couple was using fake social security numbers, and by then, they had skedaddled out of Boise. FBI agents traced them to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, after a car registered under their names was involved in a car accident. That led them to a home address, and on June 15th, 1988, Diana and John were arrested in a basement apartment in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. On June 23rd, they were extradited back to Pennsylvania, where Diana was reunited with her family. She was charged with 2 felony counts, including criminal conspiracy to escape. In December, she pled guilty to both counts.
Like the good Christian woman
she is. And in February 1989 was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
I did see that, 2 years.
Okay. John was returned to prison, served the remainder of his life sentence. In October 1988, he pled guilty to escape charges. He was given additional 3 to 7 years.
Does it matter?
Yeah,
He's
which was
already
added
doing
to his life sentence. Unfortunately, on April 26, 2012, he committed suicide in his prison cell. He was 74 years old. I tried to look up. They never said whether this couple got divorced or anything. It says that she was reunited with her family.
It could be her mom and sister and her kids.
Context again.
I don't know.
I tried to look up obituaries. I looked up all kinds of things. I could not find really anything on this woman after this time frame.
She did her time, and
she
then she
did her
went back
time,
to church.
And she got right with the Lord, and went on, it seems like, to at least live a quiet life where she never got arrested again.
She just needed an adventure, and she had one with a convicted murderer.
This was more than just a midlife crisis. Get a hobby.
Oh, she got one.
Go back to college. Read a book. Start a podcast. I don't know. Do something.
Write a letter.
Do not write a letter to a convicted felon. Ladies,
dude,
no man in prison is worth your time, your energy, or your money.
Tell you what, man,
it doesn't work out.
These guys in prison, they got game. They got game. So this one starts out from Tales from the Grave.
Mm-hmm.
A man tells us, okay, I have deposited in the county of Bedford, 4 miles from Burford, 5,100 pounds of silver, 2,921 pounds of gold. Okay? And then it goes on to tell us.
End scene. Bravo.
I know.
That was great. I'm very impressed with your dramatic reading.
Well, that was kind of how they read it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story about a man that buried some gold
up in them hills
in Bedford County, Virginia. Okay.
Had you ever heard of this, like,
No,
legend
I
or
haven't
anything?
heard, and after doing some research on this, I can tell you why.
Okay. All right. I'm excited.
So, supposedly this happened in 1821.
Okay.
Okay. A man by the name of Thomas J. Beale, supposedly, buried all this gold and silver in Bedford County, Virginia. Supposedly, Mr. Beale and 30 Virginians had gone out to New Mexico, where then they come across, they mine this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that we don't. Let me just caveat this.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to give a disclosure of some sort?
I do want to give a disclosure.
Okay.
There is a lot of contradicting stories. So
on the side research or
on all of this.
Yeah, I will say I noticed.
So
the unsolved episode was kind of like interviewing this person and that person, and this person had heard this from their grandfather, and da 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 da.
So I mean, there's just a lot of contradicting evidence. So I'm going to just kind of tell you how they tell us and the research. They go out there, they mine this stuff, and then they haul it all the way back to Virginia to bury it. And then Mr. Beale writes 3 letters. And they're coded letters.
Yep.
Okay? And it's 40 years later. One of the letters is deciphered.
And tell Ben.
Well, let me let me tell you how it gets deciphered. Okay. It's with numbers, and you need a key. And, well, Thomas Gates shows up.
Yeah.
And he looks a lot like Nicolas Cage. And he goes in, and he steals the Declaration of Independence.
He doesn't steal it.
He borrows it.
Borrowing
He borrows it. Because other bad guys were going to steal it. And Thomas Gates.
Because it's the key to a treasure map.
Treasure map. And this guy that looks a lot like Nicolas Cage deciphers this letter. All right. There's my joke. But
in reality, yeah.
Supposedly, someone figures out the key to the second one. And the code, the key to break the code is the Declaration of Independence. It's the first letter of each word on the Declaration of Independence.
It's literally the storyline.
Yes, it's national treasure.
Yeah,
it's national treasure. I mean, I was pretty excited about that because I do love that movie.
Well, and we actually just watched it the other day. We watched the second one, and I asked you, hey, is any of this based on... And you said casually you didn't know if any of this actually has... Because a lot of these things, the Freemasons and all of this stuff, I'm like, is this based on any sort of real mythology in American history? And you weren't sure. And so then it was funny that literally, a couple days later, we're watching this, and here we do have a treasure hunt of gold and silver buried in the flipping ground somewhere, and the key to unlock this treasure is the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just thought it was it was just very serendipitous timing that that you and I had that conversation, and then this is the episode that we watched. But continue.
So that cipher gets the second letter. There's 3 gets deciphered, and I think that said 40 years after. So 1860 something. Doesn't give us the exact time, right? But then the other two, all 3 of them were then printed years later.
Yeah.
Because he could never, doesn't say who, there's speculations on who it was. We'll get into that. But they print them, and now this has become a legend and a mystery. Okay. So now this was one of my favorite parts. Okay.
Okay.
Because now this has caused a lot of treasure hunters to head out to Bedford County, Virginia, looking for this. And Unsolved Mysteries interviews a judge, okay? A respectable man, okay? And his name is Raymond Minix. And he, I think, sheds a really good light on this story. He says that either someone is going to get lucky and find this treasure, or they're going to decipher the codes and they're going to find it. And I think, man, how well put. You're either going to find it out of luck, or you're just going to find it by research.
This man looks like he was in between cases. He's just
on the street.
He's on the street. He probably left the courthouse, ran down to Patty's Diner to get one of her famous BLTs. I'm surprised that the man didn't still have a napkin tucked into his shirt. He's trying to get back to the courthouse to hear about Petty down at the Piggly Wiggly who X, Y, or Z or whatever. And it looks like a camera crew came up and stopped him and asked him this, and that's the best he could come up with.
He just drops this nugget of knowledge on us that it's going to be found one or two ways. You're going to stumble on it, or you're going to research it and find it. So, I mean, now we got that. There is 2 brothers, Eddie and Joe Tooney, and their father-in-law, Earl Boggs. they've deciphered them. They won't tell you how.
Nope.
They won't tell you what they say.
Nope.
But it's led them to 5 key landmarks. They found 4. They're looking for the 5th. And at one point, they dig under a rock. And they found, can I just tell you, they found a carriage rod. And they're pretty certain.
Dude, they were
pretty certain that
they were
Thomas...
so jazzed about finding this under a
They're
rock.
pretty certain that Thomas Beale left that carriage rod under that rock intentionally. Intentionally.
It's one of the markers.
Yeah.
It's a clue.
Yeah. It's something.
I'm waiting for Nicolas Cage to show up and like take
What,
apart
Nicolas
this thing and
Cage?
put it together in a different way, and then we see.
You can't expect Nicolas Cage to do it all. He did the first one with the Declaration. He had to steal the Declaration of Independence just to be able to decipher that thing.
Yeah.
You can't expect him to do it for the other two, too. Come on, man. Like, somebody's got to pick up
The slack
pick up
around
the slack
here.
a little bit,
Yeah.
You know? So then we get into Wilbur Swift. He's figured it out.
He's got a
He
different
has
theory.
Deciphered. He's from California, but he's on the other side of Bedford County, and he found a rock that looks like a face,
But it doesn't.
but it kind of does.
It looks like a fish lips.
I don't know, but to him, it looks like a
It
face.
did not look anything.
And
I saw
supposedly-
zero resemblance
here's
of
the
the
thing.
face.
Wilbur, again, doesn't tell us what the other things say
Nope. Mm-mm.
or how he figured it out, but he says that the cipher has led him to this rock, and it's buried 25 feet down. Okay. So he hires Ken Dooley.
Ken Dooley, who actually this is probably thinking,
Actually, Ken Dooley's my favorite.
he is my favorite too because out of everyone, he's actually he's raking in the most amount of treasure.
He understands he understands
And
what's going
he
on.
lays into it.
Yeah, of course he does.
Yeah.
So Ken Dooley's an excavator. And Wilbur hires him to
Pro
come
tip,
dig.
if you hear about a hidden treasure somewhere, go start an excavation company.
And just wait.
Just wait. They'll show up.
They'll show up and they'll pay you lots of money.
Yeah.
Ken Dooley digs for this guy. And my favorite line from Ken Dooley is, "Yeah, I've done this. I've done this a lot. I've seen a lot of guys come and go. It's always 2 feet below wherever I dug.
Just 2 more feet.
It's just 2 more feet."
Every time.
I was like,
And literally without fail.
that was the best part, is he dug 25 feet for this guy.
Yep.
Or, no, he dug 24 feet or whatever. And Wilbur then says, clearly, they're not doing the interview together. Wilbur then says, "It's only 2 more feet. I just got to
get
keep digging.
2 more feet down."
Yeah, I just got
But
to
at this
dig 2 more
point,
feet.
he's doing it by hand.
Yes, because I think
He's out of money.
He spent $20,000
Lost
on
his job
yes,
over this.
lost his job. He's living in a
his
motel.
wife in California.
Yeah. He is spending everything to find this treasure. He thinks he's figured it out. Okay. So then you got Carl Hammer, who's a computer science guy. He has looked at these ciphers and he was looking to see if they're fake or not.
I know this made me think of Willy Wonka, though.
Yeah.
The scene
Well, the best part is
where they're
he's sitting
just
there.
enter this into my computer.
Yeah. And he has decided that the ciphers, that the letters are real. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know how, he hasn't broken the code yet, but they're not random numbers.
Yeah, he tries to recreate the exact environment by working at candlelight, but also in his office where there's a computer.
It's so weird. I don't understand.
I will say,
it.
so scientific, this guy takes a more scientific or mathematical approach.
Computer approach.
First off, he just wants to see, is there any pattern at all here? Because if you can come out and say, hey, these are actually all just super random, there's no pattern here, then then it's a hoax, period, end of story. However, after his candle work,
His computer work.
he does discover that there is a distinct pattern. What it means, no clue.
He has no idea.
How to decipher it, not his thing. That was his only thing, was to just decide that
he actually really presented zero to the story.
Because there was no follow-up.
No.
He didn't try to go out and find this thing. Yeah. He just decided there is a pattern here.
So they leave us at the end that we got these three guys. Mm-hmm. They're so close.
But all digging in different areas.
But not quite there. Mm-mm. Running out of money and time. My favorite part is when they go to
the locals. I knew this was going to be your favorite part.
And I said, so they picture this scene. You got 5 or 6 locals just chilling, sitting around, drinking coffee together. And they're all just laughing.
They're laughing at all of these people coming in.
Yeah. And I said to myself, I want to hang out with those guys.
Yeah, they're like, maybe it's there, maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe.
Don't care.
Don't care. One guy's like, man, I own a bunch of land out here. If someone finds it on my cut, that'd be great.
Hey, just give me 50%. It's just he's literally, I was like, yeah, I want to hang out with these guys. Mm-hmm. These guys are my jam.
Yeah.
100%. Locals are like, yeah, most of them are like, this is a hoax.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure the local economy there is doing great off treasure hunters spending a crap ton of money.
Excavation company.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, yeah. And that's pretty much where Unsolved Mysteries ends.
Unsolved Mysteries also, though, wants to remind you that it is illegal to just randomly start digging.
You can't just go around digging. Mm-hmm. Randomly. Got to get a
permit. And that's where it ends it. So,
it really ends it. So I dug in.
Okay.
Right. There's a lot wrong with this story. Okay. Here's the thing. I didn't even have to dig in to know that this story is a bunch of bull. Okay. Does anyone else not looking at the obvious? So you're telling me this dude randomly goes, they were going to New Mexico.
Yes,
we're back to 1821. You're telling me
that in 1821
Thomas Beale, they take this expedition out, mm-hmm. and that some guy just stumbles upon gold and silver, thousands of pounds of it, mm-hmm. in New Mexico, and so they decide, because we're up to 8,000 pounds. So, yeah, 8,000 pounds. 5,100
Which
pounds.
Which back then transportation was super easy.
So then they just decide to haul it
back
all the way back to Virginia. Mm-hmm. Now, in context, at this point, that's not a established land. Okay, the Louisiana Purchase has happened. History people are going to hit me with this. I don't think we really own New Mexico at this point because we got the Texas. This is before the whole Mexican
Alamo, that whole thing. That was all part of that area.
So, this is dangerous country. So I can understand you want to get it out of there, but you take it all the way to Virginia, mm-hmm. and then you bury it. Mm-hmm. Why? And then you have 30 other dudes that are involved in this, and they don't want to cut.
And also, then they never tell a single person.
And all of these guys are cool with just burying it in some county in Virginia. Supposedly, this Thomas Beale is from that area. Okay, but that's your solution. I'm gonna bury it.
And then he decides to write encrypted letters.
And then I'm going to write coded letters for other people to find all my money. Nope. Mm-mm. No one's asking these questions?
No.
Really? Really? So, come to find out, I dug some digging. We don't even know if this Thomas Beale's a real dude. This is the only time this dude comes up in history.
Well, and I would imagine if he was quote unquote wealthy enough to be able to afford this expedition in the first place, then the funds and the cost to get it back, and was wealthy enough that instead of cashing this in any way, shape, or form, he says, I don't need that money right now, but I don't trust the banks, so I'm going to bury it. Don't you think some sort of family legacy, if he was wealthy enough during that time, this is back when like you could get land for pennies. They were giving thousands of acres of land away. A lot of people that were very wealthy back then and did well for themselves are some of our biggest, wealthiest families to this day. And nobody has any record. No one has eyes on this guy.
So, like, I mean, there is conflicting accounts. Like, the census was kind of going on back then, but records are incomplete. There's some censuses with, like, Thomas Beale, not exactly how it's spelled. It's a little different, like, in the Virginia area. But then, like, there's one in 1820 that doesn't have them there. Like, there's one in Thomas Beale in Connecticut. Like, they really can't even find this guy or even know if he exists.
And if he took that big of a trade route or an expedition to go down there, wouldn't that in some way, shape, or form have been documented?
I don't know. Like, supposedly he was kind of an explorer. Like, he did.
Yeah, but so was Daniel Boone.
I don't know. So this guy...
Like, we have tons of records of the men, the frontier men, that technically did a lot of that same thing, where they traveled and explored other territories.
So
their stuff was well documented. And I hate to break it to you, the country wasn't very big at that point. Literally, these people were in constant contact with major members of the leadership of America at that time. We hear stories about these frontiermen who basically could send a letter to the White House and get information back and forth. You're telling me that still, again, we don't have any sort of documentation showing on any writings that a group of 31 men came through with thousands of pounds of gold and silver?
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test. Like, you just look into this a little bit and you're like, oh, okay.
So I did something kind of fun with this.
What's that?
So the guy that entered the stuff into the computer gave me an idea that we now have new technology. And everyone has it on their phone. I entered into ChatGPT if they could decipher the letters.
Yeah.
It told me that it had no ability to do that because no one had ever cracked them.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of fun. I was like total, that made me think of the Willy Wonka, like, let's enter it in and find out. I'm like, has anybody asked AI what they believe the cipher says? And maybe there's someone that could do a way more in-depth thing. I did a casual 5-second thing into ChatGPT, and it told me that hadn't ever been done and that there's lots of theories, and so it didn't have the ability to decipher it.
Yeah. So supposedly...
To this day, the other two... And here's the thing. You can get a copy of these letters. They're easy to find.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a secret.
No, but 2 of the 3 have never been deciphered. No one knows what they say. Speculation is, because I think in the second letter that it's clear as mud on one of those other 2 exactly where you can find it.
Yeah. So this guy, he takes us back to Virginia. We don't even know if this guy even exists. Mm-hmm. Not actually, because here's the best part. So he goes back, takes us back to Virginia, buries it, writes these letters, gives it to an innkeeper whose name is Robert Morris. And then he rides off in the sunset, never to be heard of again. Not Robert Morris, but
the original
Thomas Beale. Mm-hmm. So then he just disappears. Like, literally the only blip in history of this guy is supposedly he's got 8,000 pounds of gold and silver. Okay. So Robert Morris, the innkeeper, tries to decipher him. He can't do it, so he gives it to a friend. We don't even know who that is. We believe it to be James Ward. He spends 20 years, and he ciphers one of them.
Okay, so he's the one that ciphered it from the Declaration of Independence.
We don't.
But again,
we don't know. This is all speculation. Figures out one of them. Then he can't figure it out. Spends some more time. Can't figure it out. So he prints a pamphlet with all of them on. That's how this gets out.
when a pamphlet is presented, red flags start going up for me.
Well, pamphlets were pretty common back then.
I totally, that was like, I totally, it's, I think, and I could be wrong, that like treasure hunting and seeking during this time, like there was kind of this weird little craze, especially on the East Coast, of treasure hunting and seeking and being able to find fortunes buried in your land.
Yeah. So he prints his pamphlet, and it was a craze for a long time. People trying to figure it out. It's never really, no one has ever come out and said they've cracked the other two codes. Some people have, but they're keeping it pretty close to the chest. And I know this will all be shocking, but the treasure to this day has never been found. No treasure.
No treasure.
Sign. No nothing.
Okay, if any of our listeners out there crack the case, let us know.
So
We'd love to give you an interview.
I do want to end my story
Okay.
with a quote from Wilbur Swift, which you remember, he's a guy from California that has spent $20,000, lost his job, and lives in a motel, and left his wife, and saying it was only 2 more feet down. When interviewed, he said, "He who laughs last, laughs best. So to you, Wilbur."
That was
I'm laughing
great.
best because I can promise you're not laughing, buddy.
No. In the books. I guess this would be a good time, if people are still listening to us, please follow us on anywhere that you listen to your podcast. If you have kind words to say, we would love a 5-star review. If you don't have kind things to say, you can send us an email.
Send me a message.
Send us a message. This is still a work in progress. We are doing the very best we can. Overall, though, we've been having a lot of fun doing this together, and we hope that you guys have gotten to enjoy listening to us. And we'll see you all back here next week, where we, once again, recap Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries.
Bye.